To everyone here, Om Namo Bhagavate. Sri Aurobindo was born in Calcutta 150 years ago, educated at Cambridge University. He was a Cambridge topper, ICS topper, and a brilliant scholar in Greek, Latin, English, French. In fact, his examiner said that the best answer paper that in English that he had ever read, English, Greek, and Latin that he had ever valued was Aurobindo Ghosh. Then he gave up. He did not want to join the ICS because at that time he had developed strong patriotic feelings. So he did not join the ICS. Returned to India, worked under Maharaja of Baroda as vice principal of college, Baroda College, and he was an agnostic in the beginning, but in 1892 he wrote brilliant articles in Hindu Prakash criticizing the then Congress party, saying it is the blind being led by, if not by the blind, at least by the one-eyed. In 1892, he wrote articles highly critical of the then Congress party for being a petition-giving organization rather than fighting for India's freedom. He criticized Congress for being an elitist institution, and he called for a mass movement against the British. He was far ahead of the times, and Lokmanya Tilak and a few others asked him to restrain, and they told him that this will get him into trouble. The Maharaja of Baroda went with a retinue to Kashmir. Sri Aurobindo accompanied him. There at the Shankaracharya temple, he had a vision, and that was, he had written about it in a poem, Advaita. Then in the Kali temple in Narmada Valley, he had a vision of Kali. So these are the stages. Then he edited Bande Mataram. He was the first to talk about Purna Swaraj. Subhash Chandra Bose has written that two factors influenced him in his life. One is Sri Aurobindo, another is the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, Subhash Bose listened to Sri Aurobindo speaking in Calcutta, and that was the turning point in his life. This idea of freedom dawned into him only by listening to the fiery speeches of Sri Aurobindo in Calcutta. In fact, Sri Aurobindo went toured in Bengal and different parts of the country speaking about India's freedom. In Bande Mataram, he wrote fiery articles about the Shakti, Bharata Shakti, and the greatness of India's past. Then he was the first accused in the Alipur bomb case, and for a year he was in jail, in Alipur jail. There Vasudeva Krishna appeared before him. He saw Vasudeva everywhere, that vision of Vasudeva everywhere, and that was another turning point in his life. And Lord Krishna told him that it is his responsibility to take care of India's freedom. You concentrate on yoga. And the famous Uttarpara speech, Lord Krishna told him that Sanatana Dharma is nationalism. So long as Sanatana Dharma is there, India will be there. When Sanatana Dharma perishes, India will perish. That is, he asked, Lord Krishna asked Sri Aurobindo to go into yoga. And that was the purpose of his manifestation. He was informed. And even after being acquitted in the Alipur bomb case, the British were after him. Sister Nivedita asked him to leave Calcutta. He had an Adesh, and he came to Chandanagur, which was ruled by the French, then to Pondicherry, which was ruled by French. Pondicherry's original name was Vedapuri. The place where Sri Aurobindo Ashram was situated is exactly the location where Saint Agastya did tapas and yagna several millennia back. And in Sri Aurobindo's Bande Mataram, then Karma Yogin, in these two pre-1910 books, a lot of articles are there on India, on Indian history, Indian traditions, and he was very progressive in thinking. He said that we cannot keep 1/4 of the population as untouchables. This attitude has to change. His attitude towards women, all of these reminded us of Swami Vivekananda, who said, our religion is in the kitchen, our religion is in the cooking pot, our religion is don't touch meism. So Sri Aurobindo has the same that sociological insights. He wanted to create a new Bharatvarsh, getting the best from the ancient, but also integrating it with the best from the West. And he did not he did not say that everything in the past was golden. There were things that had to change according to the changing times. A lot of deterioration and degeneration and fossilization had taken place in the march of time. So Sri Aurobindo was one of the great rishis of Bharatvarsha, and in Foundations of Indian Culture, which was part of Arya, 1914 and 1921, he published Arya. They run into 40 volumes, each into 1,000 pages. Nobody in human history has written so much. And it is not ordinary writing. It is a writing of a very high consciousness. Each sentence will take you to a higher level of consciousness. In Arya, he wrote the famous book, Foundations of Indian Culture. Even now, we can use it to refute those who attack India, who attack Sanatana Dharma. Each point is given in Foundations of Indian Culture. Sri Aurobindo, and in Arya you find Foundations of Indian Culture, then the Life Divine, in which he talks about the evolution of consciousness from animal to man, man to superman. Evolution of the involution of Satchidananda or Brahman, the evolution of Satchidananda, and Satchidananda in a veiled form in all places, the evolution from inconscience to matter, matter to life, life to mind. Now we are at that stage of mind, and the mind is divisive. The problem is we have created an intellectual world, and the mind is very divisive, and mind creates problems. Mind creates problems. The intellect is, mind is not final, man is not final. Mind is not final, man is not final, and man has to go to higher levels of consciousness, and we have to go beyond the mind to higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, over mind, finally the supermind. The supramental consciousness has to descend. Few people are getting enlightenment, but humanity is not changing. For humanity to change, consciousness has to change. We have to evolve to higher levels of consciousness. We have created a mental civilization. We have to move to the supramental civilization. And he said, India is the guru of the world. And the mother has said, India is not the earth, the rivers, the mountains of this land. Neither is it a collective name for the inhabitants of this country. India is a living being, as much living as says Shiva. India is a goddess as Shiva is a god. If she likes, she can manifest in human form. Mother India is not a piece of earth. She is a power, a godhead, for all nations have such a Devi supporting their separate existence. The soul of India is one and indivisible. India is conscious of her mission in the world. She is waiting for the exterior means of manifestation. India is the guru of nations, the physician of the human soul in his profounder maladies. She is destined once more to new mold the life of the world and restore the peace of the human spirit. In the whole creation, the earth has a place of distinction because, unlike any other planet, it is evolutionary with a psychic entity at its center. In it, India in particular is a divinely chosen country. There is only one. Mother wrote to Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister of India, there is only one country in the world that knows that there is only one truth to which everything should be turned, and that is India. Other countries have forgotten it, but in India it is ingrained in the people, and one day it will come out. So in Arya, we have Foundations of Indian Culture, then his commentaries on the Upanishads, then Secret of the Veda. The Vedic truth was locked. Sri Aurobindo unlocked it. Sayanacharya's ritual interpretation, Max Miller's interpretation that the Indians are tribals, Sri Aurobindo differed from these two, and he gave us a mystic interpretation of the Vedas, the secret of the Veda. The Vedic gods appeared before Sri Aurobindo. And his essays on the Gita, his essays on the sociology on the the evolution of humanity, that is human unity, human cycle, war and self-determination, then the life divine, so many, 40 volumes running into each volume 1000 pages. Nobody in human history has written so much. And in Foundations of Indian Culture, he writes page on page on India. It is Mother India revealing to us her story. And he starts with the Vedic period. Her first period was luminous with the discovery of the spirit. The second complemented the discovery of the Dharma. The third elaborated into detail. The first simpler formulation of the Shastra, but none was exclusive. The three elements are always present. At the Vedic dawn, the rishis had the vision of Satyam, Rhythm, Brihat. The central idea of the Vedic rishis was the transition of the human soul from a state of death to a state of immortality. And rishis like Vishwamitra, Vashishta, Vamam, Deva, so many rishis were there. The Indian mind has always turned back to the Vedic home of origins and springs of perennial truth. Then the Upanishadic age, the insights of the Veda became more defined and intuition went hand in hand with logical reasoning. The Upanishads added intellectual dimension to Vedic poetry. The ideas of the Upanishads can be rediscovered in the thought of Pythagoras and Plato, and later in Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, Sufism, the philosophical thinking of the West. And then Sri Aurobindo describes the times of the Upanishads. The scenes of the old world live before us in a few pages. The sages sitting in their groves ready to test and teach the corner. Princes and learned Brahmins and greatly lauded nobles going about in search of knowledge. The king's son in his chariot, and the illegitimate son of the servant girl seeking any man who might marry in himself the thought of life and the world of revelation. The typical figures and personalities, Janaka, the subtle mind of Ajatashatru, Raikva of the cart, Yajnavalkya, militant for truth, calm and ironic, Krishna, son of Devaki, who had single word of Rishi Gora who heard a single word of Rishi Gora and knew at once the eternal, the ashramas, the courts of kings, who were also spiritual discoverers and thinkers, the great sacrificial assemblies where the sages met and compared their knowledge. We see how the soul of India was born and how arose this great birth song in which it soared from the air into the supreme spirit. The Vedas and the Upanishads are not only the sufficient fountainhead of Indian philosophy and religion, but of all Indian art, poetry, and literature. And then he comes to the period of the epics, and he describes Ramayana and Mahabharata, their uniqueness, their significance, and then the classical Sanskrit literature, Kalidasa, and also how this Vedic wisdom got filtered into the different literatures of India. He deals in detail way back in 1914 about Thiruvalluvar, Avvaya, the classical Sanskrit age, the Shaiva saints, the great epics of Tulsidas, Kamban, and Nanak, the Sikh gurus. So the Vedic wisdom, how it got filtered into the Indian languages and Indian traditions. And he has translated Thiruvalluvar. He studied Tamil. Subramania Bharati taught him Tamil. Sri Aurobindo taught Subramania Bharati Vedas. And Subramania Bharati wrote a book, Veda Rishigalin Kavyangal, that is the poetry of the Vedic rishis. After coming in contact with Sri Aurobindo, Bharati's poetry changed. And he started writing about the Vedas and Upanishads, and that profound impact is there in his Tamil poetry. So, and in Pondicherry, a group of people used to assemble, and so Sri Aurobindo read a verse from the Rig Veda and described the meaning. He had his own mystic interpretation of the Vedas, unlike Sayanacharya's ritualistic interpretation. And Sri Aurobindo not only talked about the golden past, but of a golden future, that humanity is evolving, that greater rishis will come in the future. And he said that we are moving towards that supramental age. India pursued the spirit but neglected matter. The West pursued matter but neglected the spirit. What is required, he said, is an integration of matter and spirit. He believed, Sri Aurobindo wrote, that the Mayavada of Shankaracharya did a lot of harm to this country we became a life-denying society. And he wanted a divine life in a divine body. That spirituality is not an escape from life, but leading a divine life here itself. He took us back to Krishna's Vedanta and the preached in the Gita at Kurukshetra, that it was Sri Aurobindo's spirituality was a life-affirming spirituality, not a life-denying spirituality. And he says in Foundations of Indian Culture, India of the ages is not dead, nor has she spoken her last creative word. She lives and has still something to do for herself and the human peoples. And that which we must seek now is to awake and is not the anglicized oriental people, docile people of the West, and doomed to repeat the cycle of Occident's success and failure, but still the ancient, immemorable Shakti recovering her deepest self, lifting her head higher towards the supreme source of life and strength, and turning to discover the complete meaning and to a vaster form of her dharma. Of course, Sri Aurobindo says again and again that spirituality is the keynote to Indian thought. Unless we understand that this is essentially a spiritual society, we can never understand India. That India has told us this body, mind is limited. We are that eternal soul, and Amritavsya Putra, the Upanishad says. So we are the eternal. And unless we are, the West has always concentrated on this body, mind. And mind, we have created a mental civilization. Sri Aurobindo says we have to go beyond the mind. We have to go beyond man to higher levels of creation. And so Sri Aurobindo, educated in the West, he's a scholar in Greek, Latin, Italian, German. He's returned to India and studied Sanskrit and Indian languages. He became a prominent politician and a hero. Subhash Bose says that he would not have entered politics without Sri Aurobindo. So many have said this because he was the first to talk about Purna Swaraj. And we talk about post-colonialism, but nobody mentions Sri Aurobindo. He was the first post-colonial critic. He gave the counter discourse to the Western criticism of India way back in 1914 in Arya. And he refuted this Aryan Dravidian theory in Secret of the Veda. He says there has never been an Aryan Dravidian theory. This is one race. Indian race is one. There's no, he goes further and says the Indo-Afghan race is one. There has been never, he says this Dravidian theory is a concoction of the British Christian missionaries who have nefarious intentions in dividing this country. But people don't mention Sri Aurobindo. He sowed the seeds way back, more than 100 years back, he sowed the seeds of harmony. He wanted to lift humanity to higher levels of consciousness. Lord Krishna defended and descended into Sri Aurobindo in 1926. And from 1926 to 1950, he did not get out of a room. He was doing tapas, trying to bring the supramental consciousness down. And because the supermind, the Vedas say, is hidden by a golden lid. Once the supermind descends, there is peace, there is harmony. Mother brought it down in 1956. It is there, the supramental. But it is caught in inconscience. Humanity has to change. We have to cooperate. The Sri Aurobindo and Mother have repeatedly told us the golden era has come. We have to understand it, and future will be golden. And Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is integral, all-round fulfillment of the divine on this very earth. And the Mother has stated, India is not the earth, the rivers and the moon. India is a living being, like Shiva is a goddess. Like Shiva, India is a goddess, as Shiva is a god. If she likes, she can manifest in human form. Mother India is not a piece of earth. It is a godhead. So there are so many writings of Sri Aurobindo. He has dealt with almost all aspects of India. And Mother also has said, it is only India's soul who can unify the country. Externally, the provinces of India are very different in character, tendencies, culture. But her soul is one, intense in her aspiration towards the spiritual truth, the essential unity of creation. Subramania Bharati said, my mother India speaks 18 languages, but her soul is one. So, the Life Divine, Savitri, all these works have to be studied by us. And we have to create a Bharatvarsh, taking the best from the ancient and integrate it with best from the West. Sri Aurobindo did not reject the West. He wanted to integrate the West and the East. The West neglected spirit, India neglected matter. We have to integrate matter with spirit. In Aurobindo, you can see people from all over the world. Sri Aurobindo and Mother's tapas was a supreme tapas. They were supreme yogis, wanted to bring the supramental consciousness down and create a supramental era. Let us bow down to these avatars, because Bharatvarsh has created great rishis, and Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo in our times are the greatest rishis. Om Namo Bhagavate.
Thank you so much. Just a small clarification, if you can give me. You said about that Subhashan Bose was inspired and he listened to Aurobindo's lecture in college. But before that, he has been in his school, been reading Vivekananda Sahitya. In fact, his teacher told to his father that if he's reading, please beware. So that influence started from Vivekananda much before. That's what I wanted to a little clarification from.
Aurobindo himself, there was Swami Vivekananda's influence.
Correct. And this.
That's why I mentioned these two names.
These two names, correct. This was.
Yeah. So. Yeah, you're done. No. Yeah. It's a very inspiring lecture, including the one previous. Yeah. So I think it's back to back. It's like a very tense T20 match. Yeah. Yeah. So. And I think in these two speeches, what was coming out again and again is misinterpretations, gaps, neglects, amplitude of differences, even existing as of now, which is actually the need of the hour. It was evident in your speech. It was evident in her speech, and that's actually the need. What has happened today in the plethora of globalization, which is a part of the universal process and making everything secular. We have resorted to different, sectors and domains. So if you pick up a book, I was in Goa in an international. Do I have a minute to speak? So I was in Goa in an international Indological conference where I met scholars like Ian Wicker, who has written Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, one of the authentic books. And in that entire conference, Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda was never mentioned. Was never mentioned. For about 3 days. So it's not a question that, it's not an issue that they have to be mentioned. I mean, including Savarkar say. But it shows that in the way we are taught, in the way we are trained to think, and the way Indology, Indic studies, and today we call it Indian knowledge systems. These are all namesake. They don't make a difference unless and until the right passion and the right truth and that combination of the Brahma Teja and the Shatra Virya, that combination actually comes, combination comes, because they give us the two potents. And you talked about the Gita. The whole of the Gita is not Brahminical, it's absolutely Kshatriya. It's a parampara from the Kshatriya, the Rajarshis. It's actually a derivation. If you look at the 4th chapter, the first 3 slokas, Lord Krishna says that ancient parampara of yoga, which was introduced by the sage kings, the Rajarshi, was lost over the ages, and I'm saying that to you. So already at the beginning of the Iron Age, at the end of the Bronze Age, the parampara of yoga has taken a back seat, and we are about to enter the Iron Age. And I think I can go on like this, but this was absolutely brilliant. That was also brilliant, and because we have to look at these two deliberations in a different light. It's not either or. What I mean to say is that we have to expand our horizon and see the two deliberations in a different light. And I just like to mention one thing. Since you almost went from the tangible to the intangible, and you're logical and rational, and you're also getting mystical at times. But mystery is not the right word. It's actually frequencies which are gross and frequencies which are subtle. Yeah. So in gross frequency you get science. And in subtle frequencies, you get meta-science, which is yoga and spirituality. So that beautiful dialogue which happened between Swami Vivekananda and Bidehi dialogue and Sri Aurobindo in the Alipur Central Jail, which today only is getting coded, needs to be revisited. And the whole idea of the supramental, what exactly is the supramental, what is its role in the future transformation. So it's not going beyond, but it's transformation. It's not rupatit, it's rupantar. It's Rupanta. It's transforming the earth consciousness and stitching the two liberties that humanity has produced, which is the spiritual liberty of India and the political liberty of the Greeks, which went to France and then went to the United States. So Swamiji, Sri Aurobindo, and I think all the sages from Agastya to Sri Aurobindo has always talked about the integration. It was so well evident in your speech. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
See, one question here, if I can add. How do you see the difference in the difference and the similarities between Aurobindo and Gandhi? Sorry. Okay. And maybe in general or maybe specific to Gita?
One thing I want to add. I want to ask to the Sachin, to ask Ramaswamiji, that he has criticized, Aurobindo has criticized Gandhi on the matter of the freedom. So,
many issues. The Cripps mission, for example, the Cripps mission, Sri Aurobindo advised to accept that, and everybody, including to an extent Netaji. I mean, I'm a 100% follower of Netaji, but even Netaji was not that convinced. And if the Congress would have listened to the Cripps mission, India wouldn't have been divided at 1947. Yeah.
Sri Aurobindo, the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Aurobindo says in Foundations of Indian Culture and other places, was even our Vedanta is a Kshatriya kind this thing, and after the invasion, 1000 AD, the Kshatriya class vanished, and the Brahmins, it became their preserve. That was one of the unfortunate things he says and the three acharyas he says, the Shankara, Ramanja and Madhva, and he is highly critical of Shankara. They were debating, arguing, they wanted to prove that their ideology was the greatest, but he says we have to go back to the intuitive time, the Upanishads, and get that experience and not get caught in these kind of controversies.
The three Vedantas.
The three.
Advaitas.
In Life Divine, he has such a, and he says Buddha and Shankara both influenced India a lot, but theirs was a partial realization. He salutes them. He says Buddha is the greatest spiritual personality in history. Shankara is the greatest intellectual and human. But he is highly critical of both, especially Shankara. And he also quotes from Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda in one talk, one Brahmin in South, they said, from which Bhashya of Shankara do you quote? Vivekananda immediately and rose up and I, Vivekananda, says this. Sri Aurobindo quotes that and he says, this is Vivekananda's greatest counter discourse to that great Dravidian. He refers to Shankara as the great Dravidian.
I have a question.
And Gandhi?
Gandhi, I don't want to get into controversy. Ahimsa is for sannyasis. When we have to fight, we have to fight. Sri Aurobindo has said so much about Gandhi. He calls him a Tolstoy and Christian. His interpretation of Gita is a Christian interpretation. And he did not have any positive view. When you have to fight, you have to fight. But let us not get into this. All have played a role.
So Sri Aurobindo wrote so many books, right? How much of literature is really his own? Because I heard...
He wrote. Arya was written by him. It says he said he came to him.
I know, but physically did he write
Yes,
physical copies?
He wrote.
Because recently I heard that so much of them were not written by him, like
No.
Adi Shankara.
No.
Absolutely, that is wrong.
So he went into hibernation for 40 years and he came
Yes.
back. So I don't know. It's a question.
Not hibernation. He was doing tapas.
I know, but
I believe he
but he's out of
predicted,
contact with public, so the literature came out. So
Pardon?
So the literature came out after
1914 to 1921, Arya,
Okay.
Later he revised it in 1939-40.
Okay.
He was not able to revise completely. Life Divine he revised here.
Yeah, in fact, I think I don't think. In fact, the Karma Yogi Patrika, which was in Kolkata, was jointly run by Sister Nivedita and Sri Aurobindo. And most of his early writings are straight published from Kolkata itself. Then after the departure of Sri Aurobindo, Sister Nivedita just took it for a few years. And all the other literature are actually written in Pondicherry, and including The Brain of India, The Hour of the God, and everything. And in fact, there are about 3 letters which I already said, which mentions that he's saying that he cannot complete the commentaries on the Upanishads and everything, because probably he has felt, because he was moving by the word, the voice, and he said, whatever has been done, and probably it's enough is enough. So he was going into a different plane altogether. And at that point of time, Mira Alfaza, the mother, was taking over the reins of Pondicherry, and Sri Aurobindo was getting into absolutely a larger and a deeper plane of consciousness. So these are clarities that needs to go across our understanding. And so similar disclarities are there with regard to Swami Vivekananda. There are people within the Ramakrishna mission who interprets Vivekananda in a different light. There are people, his own Guru brothers, some of them opposed him, when he had given mantras to the Western people, the Omkar mantra, and they asked him, why did he give them? And Swamiji said, they are Brahmins. He said, they are not born in a Brahmin family. Swamiji said, so what? But I could say Sattvadhika. That means they are on the summit of Swattaguna. Whereas you Indians are at the level of tamasic, and you don't deserve that mantra. So he was a rebel. He was a fighter. So you have to understand them before we make comments and observations about them. We have to be in their light. We cannot interpret them in our light, but to interpret them in their lights, in their levels of consciousness. So these are very crucial clarities, which is the need of the hour. Before we get into Indological studies and Indic studies and Indian knowledge systems. I'm a professor at IIT Kharagpur, and I think I'll never get a chance to address this gathering and in Medavo. In my last 25 years, including I've always seen this deficit. There's a huge amplitude, boldness that is missing to accept truth as truth, a spade, and then define the shades of truth, so that when you are dealing with the dishonest people, you have to be very strong. And when you are dealing with a sadhu, then you can have ahimsa and things like that. And the most important thing is that if you are brave and if I am able to overtake him by power, then only I am fit to show ahimsa. Am I clear? Otherwise, my ahimsa is only a weakness. Yeah. So if I have all the power to overtake him, and then after that, if I show ahimsa, then I fit to be a person of ahimsa. That is the definition of Gita, Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, and even our ancient sages. Yes, sir.
I was asking, you mentioned about the Swami Vivekananda influencing Shri Aurobindo in the jail, but there's nothing clearly written or spoken.
No, there are about 3 letters by Sri Aurobindo himself. One to Nirodbaran, one to Lonilikamta Gupta, and one straight to Josephine MacLeod, who was a direct disciple of Swamiji, who visited Pondicherry. And that time Sri Aurobindo was not speaking that much, but when Joe arrived in Pondicherry, Sri Aurobindo opened up. And Sri Aurobindo said, the way I am seeing you, I saw your Guru 100 times more powerful. It was much more realistic.
In the Alipur jail.
In the Alipur Central Jail. And he came to me for about 18 days in the Bidehi, intangible Yogeshwara form, to hint me a very high plane of yoga, which he could not address in his life. So he was transferring me a power which came from the 7 sages of the Angirashas, the Saptarshis. So Vivekananda gave me a hint, but he never mentioned what it was in name. It is I who termed it as the supramental. Yeah. So this is exactly.
But when he says Uttapara, he doesn't mention.
No, Uttapara is much earlier. Yeah, I mean, those speeches are not connected to. Uttapara is more generic, and this is.
He mentions Krishna.
He does not, because that is very specific. Uttapara is a public speech, and this letter is a private domain.
He said partition will go. It will go, he said.
It should go. He said
it should go.
It should go. He didn't say it will go.
It will go, he said.
It should go. Otherwise, India will be divided in weekend. It will not.
Yeah, there is a. I mean, this space is becoming almost like a dialogue box. So So if you don't mind, I can say a few things. So when Pandit Nehru was invited to Pondicherry,
Sir, we are already beyond.
Okay, one last thing. This is the last. So when Pandit Nehru was invited to Pondicherry and he climbed up the stage, behind Mother he could see Akhand Bharat, from Afghanistan to Myanmar, Burma, and Nehru objected. Mother just laughed at him and said, this is momentary and temporary. This was India and this shall be India very soon. Yeah. And Nehru could not, digest, because, he, with two other friends of him, that he divided India to what we are in right now. And today, right now, you can see the vagaries and the changes that's coming to Bangladesh, to Sri Lanka and Pakistan, the instability and the need of an integration. Probably it will take another 5 years, 15 years, 25 years, but it's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's going towards that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for a nice conversation and a very great talk. So probably we can learn a lot from Aurobindo.